One of the challenges that I face as a case manager, a field case manager who works in the community with the elderly, the disabled, and with many of my clients who are impoverished, is the question of how involved do I get with them? Some of my clients would love for me to fill out all their paperwork for them, make calls for them, advocate for them. And really, that's not the ideal. I have about 200 clients that I help care for, that I help provide services to. And I really prefer that they advocate for themselves. Now, I think of two passages in Scripture. One is in Galatians 6:2, where Paul says, "Bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ." But a few verses later in Galatians 6:5, Paul says, "Each one must bear his own load." Well, which is it? Well, both are true. It depends on the individual. It depends on the situation. So in Galatians 6:2, he says, "Bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ." So there are some situations that I'll go into where I'm visiting with a client where they are just overwhelmed. They're just overrun by difficulties. Or they lack the capacity. Maybe they're dealing with early onset dementia. Maybe they have some mild IDD issues. Maybe they're dealing with some trauma in life, something that's just, hit them and thrown them off a little bit. And so they need somebody to come along and help shoulder that burden. And that may require me to fill out documentation on their behalf. It may require me to make phone calls on their behalf. It may require more of me helping them and advocating for them. But Galatians 6:5 says each one must bear his own load. Now, if a client can advocate for themselves, if they're not overwhelmed with the burdens of life such that it's handicapping them, then what I want to provide for them is information. And that becomes its own challenge for me to stay up to date on what resources are available in the community. But I will try to educate my client about federal resources, about state resources, about county resources, about city resources, and to know what particularly is beneficial to them. Now, I live in Tarrant County in Texas, and we have a lot of resources here. Last I heard a few years ago was that there are upwards of 750 social agencies in Tarrant County. Now, once you get out into rural areas, that begins to decline because most of those resources are concentrated in the county and in the cities. But out of that pool of agencies, only a certain percentage may be relevant to my clients because I deal with the elderly, I deal with the disabled, and most of my clients are impoverished, although some do have some financial means. But when I am helping my clients, I may point them to the Area Agency on Aging for durable medical equipment. I may point them to the state of Texas, to the Department of Aging and Disability Services, if they need help with an in-home caregiver attendant, or maybe some home-delivered meals. I will point them to the county if they need help with utility assistance, such as that which is provided through the county, what's called SUAP, the Special Utility Assistance Program. Or Fort Worth has the Community Action Partners, their own utility assistance program. Because what I've learned over the years is that sources can be allocated from the federal, the state, the county, the zip code, or the city, and sometimes even down to a particular zip code. Some cities will allocate resources to zip codes maybe where there's an impoverished community. And so there's 2 zip codes where there's money available and services that are available that may not be available elsewhere in the county. So staying up to date with this information is very, very challenging for me as a case manager who has to know what's available. And again, it could be things related to rental assistance, utility assistance, prescription assistance, transportation assistance. Maybe I've got a client who's dealing with depression and they need to talk to a counselor. So I'll refer them over to the Women's Center, where they have counselors there. If the client is dealing with social isolation, I have to know what resources are available. And the challenge also is that with regard to a lot of resources, there may come down grant money for a particular program, and that resource or service may be available this year and next year, but when the grant dries up, well, so does the service, so does the resource. But with regard to a lot of my clients who can care for themselves, who can advocate for themselves, I want to try to educate them. I'll give them the information. I'll let them know as best as I can the criteria for eligibility. I'll give them a name and a number to call or a website to go to so that they can advocate for themselves. That's always the ideal situation, is just me giving them information. But then there are situations where I have to step in and I have to do more because they're just overwhelmed, or they lack the capacity because of, again, early onset or moderate dementia, or IDD, or just some trauma that's just, again, really overwhelmed them. So in those situations, I will step in and fill out the paperwork for them, or I will make a call on their behalf. Sometimes I've even delivered paperwork or forms. I remember years ago I had a client in South Arlington, and the city of Arlington was one of three. Keller, Fort Worth, and Arlington, I think, were the three cities who would allocate financial resources that came down to them for a program called CDBG, which was the Community Development Block Grant. And I had a client who lived in her own home, was low income, but she needed some home repair. She needed a bathroom renovated to accommodate her disability, and she had some uneven floors. Well, the city of Arlington had this grant that was available that would allow this client, because she met the age criteria, she met the income, she owned her home, she wasn't delinquent on taxes. And so I helped her fill out the paperwork and then hand delivered it over to a representative with the city of Arlington, who then took it over and worked with the client and got the home repairs done. But in that situation, because of the client's not being able to get to the city to deliver that, and because of some mild IDD issues, I was able to step in and help the client. But again, these are situations that require me to do a little bit more. So again, you really kind of have to look at the situation. And so again, I think of those two passages where I'm commanded as a Christian to share one another's burdens, to help shoulder that burden, or the other directive where each person must bear his own load. And so it just requires me to educate them on what resources and services are available. So I think about those two verses often when I'm out visiting with clients, and how do I help them? Listen, there's some clients that would love for me to do everything for them. They'd love me to fill out all their forms and make all the deliveries and call the appropriate people. I don't have time for that. Again, I've got about 200 clients that I'm trying to help provide care for. And so I face my own challenges. So I need to try to be as wise as I can in trying to help my clients in the community. But again, I think about those two verses. And this has been somewhat of a brief little video, but it just explains some of the nuanced differences with regard to how we evaluate clients and the level of involvement that we have with regard to trying to care for them and to get them the resources and services they need to improve the overall quality of their life. I thank you for taking the time to watch this little video. I hope it's been helpful to you.